Hey everyone, welcome to the Good News Podcast. This one turned into a two-parter. We just couldn't help it. There's four of us, and it's being released around Father's Day, and so that's happening because of who is on this particular conversation, this episode. But I would want to also say, don't limit listening to this one around Father's Day, because it's about so much more. It's about relationships. It's about open communication. It's about working through stuff together as a family. So this is me, of course, with our daughter Leah, and we have Sean Hilliker and his daughter Morgan. You may remember Sean Hilliker. He was on a previous episode as a teacher, phys ed teacher, and it was one of our most watched, listened to, followed episodes. I called him like the most positive teacher on the planet, because he's just a really, really positive guy that has a lot of inspiration to offer. And not only does he talk about it really, really, really well, he's very articulate, but he lives it, man. He lives it. And you're going to catch that. I would say the word to describe this whole thing, this whole conversation, again, it's two-parter, get ready. But I would say is authenticity. There was an authenticity from, I think, everyone around the table, and definitely delving pretty deep into some very real stuff. Went some places that I was not expecting, but that's okay. That's what the Holy Spirit sometimes does. That's where these conversations roll, and I think you'll be blessed. Certainly hope you are. Pray that you are by this conversation, friends. Get ready. Fasten your seatbelts. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to the Good News Podcast. And as you can see, and we'll hear in just a moment, we have three special guests with us today, and I am super pumped for this conversation. We have my daughter Leah, and we have back on the podcast Sean Hilliker, who I mentioned in the introduction, did an incredible job talking about his life as a teacher. Go check that one out. Share with teachers that you know. It will encourage and inspire them. And we have Sean's daughter, Morgan, who in some ways was responsible for us meeting in the first place, I believe. So though we hadn't planned that, can we go back to that story? Because that's just a cool story as we think about father-daughter relationships and the response that you two had, Leah and Morgan, when you guys met. And I just remember getting a text from Leah saying, anyway, you go.
No, we were just recounting it. Okay. That's exactly what happened. We were hanging out and we were talking about just our family, I guess.
It was one of the first times, like, we'd met before, but the first times we were really, like, actually
connecting.
Talking and, like, learning about each other. Yeah.
And so we just were talking, and I was like, yeah, my dad likes basketball. And she's like, my dad likes basketball. And I was like, and just all these similarities. And so I remember I texted my dad. I was like, I found your new best friend.
Yeah. Oh, because then you were like, and he really wants to start a podcast. I'm like, my dad has a podcast. And then you're saying what, like, the podcast dream that you had. And I'm like, it's so similar. Like, we have to have them on the podcast together. So we texted you guys that night. I have to set them up.
History was made.
Yeah, that's so true. And here we are today.
Yeah,
that's very cool. That's very cool. Well, I know I obviously heard about that. Leah texted me, I think, that night. And I don't know about you, Sean, but my reaction to it was just like, I was just really grateful that she thinks about me. Because she's out with her friends. Like, who am I? I'm her dad.
For sure.
Anyway, it was cool just to get that. Like, that's cool that I'm on her mind enough that came up, and that kind of love and respect that's what I felt and heard when I got
similar for sure. Yeah, that's well said.
Yeah,
I would feel the same.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Well, let's talk father-daughter, daughter-father, and it's a cool relationship that we've been blessed with around this table. I guess also want to say if people are listening and watching today, that sometimes people don't have these kinds of relationships with their family, and just want to acknowledge that out of the gates here. That if you're in a relationship where it's been broken and there's deep pain, we feel for you. We pray for you. We're sorry. That's the way, and that hope that there's a new day ahead, another day ahead. But I know we're blessed around this table. Sean, how would you describe your relationship with Morgan, who talks about you at a dinner party with her new friend?
Yeah.
No pressure.
Yeah.
No, you know what? Morgan, just like my son as well, makes my wife and I very proud. I guess I would say if I was going to describe my relationship with Morgan, I would say we are very close, and probably safe to say that traditionally fathers and sons are usually close, I would say, but maybe not necessarily fathers and daughters aren't always as close. I know there's always exceptions and whatnot, but with Morgan and I, we don't share all the same interests, but I think what allows us to be close is I think we each share a sincere like desire to have an interest in what is important to the other person. Like Morgan may be involved in things that I'm not involved with, but I'm really interested in what she's up to. And I think Morgan does the same for me. She may not be as interested in herself in some of the things that bring me passion and joy, but she takes a big interest in it. She asks about it. She wants to be a part of it. And I think that allows us to be close, even though we may have some differences. And so it's a real special relationship I'm really grateful for. And it's kind of cool to be on this podcast again in person. I'm telling you, if anyone has a chance to come to Brampton and check out the congregation, it's a vibrant place, a very welcoming, encouraging place with an amazing studio. And this is a thrill. So we're happy to be here.
Cool. Oh, thanks, Sean. So good to have you here. And Morgan, how does that align with what you experience and what you think about your relationship with your dad?
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. I think to go a little more into depth, for example, like my dad's very physical and active and enjoys sports and, athleticism. And I enjoy it to an extent, but it's not my passion or something that I do often. So, for example, like he's in a basketball league, a men's basketball league, and I went last weekend brought a sign and was excited to, support. And, I check in. He said he had a game, checking in. How was it? Did you win? What's going on? Because I think it's easy. You can, even if you're not into something, it's easy to just ask kind of the general, oh, how was your day? Or, oh, what's going on? But I think to get close, since we do not have as many similarities like on the surface, I think to go in depth and ask more questions and try to be an active member of their interests, even if I'm not actually participating in it.
Understanding why they like it, not just what it is that they like.
Yeah, it's just important because I feel like then you can have more than this surface level understanding of it. Like if he didn't ask me questions about my interest in theater and, if he was just kind of like, oh, how was the audition? Or, that would be nice. But for him to be, oh, what's it for? Oh, do you have a video of you practicing? Oh, can you FaceTime me and tell me more about it? That allows for the connection to grow deeper and for then the foundation of our relationship to be stronger. So, yeah, I'd agree.
Well, and I love what you say, Morgan. What I'm hearing is it takes work, actually.
Oh, totally.
Because that's work to ask questions. It is for me. It's work to think about questions as opposed to just talk, which I tend to do.
It takes work to try and understand when it's not something that you typically would be passionate about or know about, right? Yeah. Like you do have to take quite an interest to like process, like, how does that work? Like, I mean, I know even when you and I, Dad, talk about like music stuff, I mean, it's kind of similar. Like you're definitely super active, totally into sports. I've been more into music. Same thing. Like, I mean, I love being active. I've played some sports, but I haven't like pursued that. And so like, Dad will come up with like different analogies.
We're thinking about the same thing, I'm pretty sure.
Like talking about like,
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I was playing this sports game and had, it's kind of like in music when this happens and you do that and he's like trying to describe. And I'm like, Dad, I do understand sports. Like you can use your sports reference and I will still be just as excited because I will get it. But it does take work sometimes when you don't fully understand a world, right?
I remember exactly where we were. We were out on a run and we were going by the Heart Lake soccer field and it was the beginning of the run. And for whatever reason, I was doing this again. And Leah was like, Dad, like you don't have to use an example every time you tell me something about sports. I actually get it. Which was so cool. Which is a quality that I love about you, Leah. But we'll get to those qualities we love. Don't want to miss this. Okay, so what would be something that you've experienced, Morgan and Sean, where you've had to intentionally take that extra effort to really enter into each other's life, to get kind of concrete with that? I mean, you mentioned a little bit there on playing basketball and may or may not be your thing, but because I love my dad, I want to hear a bit more. I want to try to understand what's going on. But just any other examples where you've really had to, again, work at it, which is okay, to show that kind of love for each other.
Totally. I think even in terms of when one of us is going through something or if I'm going through a struggle, even just our communication sometimes can, we come from different generations where it's like, you're an older man, I'm a younger woman. Like we've gone through different things in life. So that can affect how you would handle certain situations. So if ever sometimes I'm upset or going through something, sometimes maybe your reaction, and I feel like you'd agree with this, would be more to try to provide support and like solutions and being like, oh, well, why don't you try this or do this or this? But sometimes I find that I am more just wanting someone to listen and just kind of take that in. But because he cares so much and he's my dad, he wants to help. And like, that's an amazing quality that I appreciate. But I feel like sometimes it's interesting to find a way to communicate where you both feel like you're getting what you need from the interaction. And so just by vocalizing it, like, okay, I need you to just support me here. Like, I don't need solutions. I don't need you to keep asking. Like, I just want you to be there for me. And then he totally is. It's more, you know, he's going into it with a good intention, or I'm going into it with a good intention, but the result can maybe just add to the stress that I'm already feeling. If it's like, okay, I know I need to do this. I know I need to do this, but just listen and help. That will be enough kind of thing. And I feel like when we communicate that, it's totally fine and it's very effective. And
it's nice you feel comfortable enough to like say those kinds of things, right? Because that doesn't, I feel like that's when certain relationships, whether it is like family or just friends, things can sort of butt heads when you like, you don't feel like you can say those kinds of things to those people. And then eventually it just builds up and you can never get close because there's all these little walls that have been built up. But you know, when you break them down from the start, then you can just always be open.
Yeah, like we have different life experiences. So of course, maybe your perspective, and you could chime in, like I think your perspective might be helpful in your mind and that would be helpful to you. But since I'm going through different things, or I have a lot of anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder that I've struggled with for so many years, where it can change and impact my thought patterns and what helps me or what I'm going through, that maybe that's not your first nature to experience. But since you've experienced that with me through time and growing and learning more, it just feels like, just as long as you can kind of communicate that, then it's helpful. But
yeah, love the open communication. I think you're naming something, Morgan, that really interesting. What how you feel or what you think about this, Sean. But I find is really hard as a parent to not fix your kids' lives, because as you said, I love how you said it, Morgan. You love them so much that you just want to, and you guys are at an age now where you need to live your life and you need to find your way. I remember back when Leah was very young, we lived in a townhouse complex here in Brampton, and it was just me and Leah. Katrina was out somewhere, and so I had taken Leah to this little park down the road, and I left her like at 5-6 years old, maybe something like that. Maybe no, must have been 3 or 4 years old. And I left her with some, there were a bunch of teenagers in the complex who would babysit her, and they said, oh, let us look after her and that kind of thing. And I thought, okay, I'll go for half an hour and come back. And it was good for you. It was good for them, good for Leah, good for them. But I remember, I don't know, I walked away and I don't know what happened. I think, oh, Katrina's going to kill me. So I walked back and I remember that Leah was trying to do the hula hoop and she couldn't get it. And she was crying. And so it just... And I just remember in that moment, I don't know why, but God gave me this reflection in that moment of this is going to happen over and over and over again throughout her life. Not the hula hoop, but there's going to be things that are going to happen that you can't solve for her. And so I walked away. I think I was probably crying because it was so hard. But again, that whole thing, like it's hard as a parent to not resolve things for your kids. Maybe even more so for your daughter. No, I shouldn't say that. That's not true. It's different. Anyway, let me just retract that. But yeah, so I'm hearing that in this conversation, Sean, as far as absolutely, I know you understand that, Morgan and Leah, but as parents, it can be really hard not to try to solve your kids' problems. And that's a learning, I know, for me, probably still, but over the years. Yeah, how about you, Sean?
It is a weakness that I've recognized within myself, and it comes from a good place, like you mentioned. You want to protect your kids from heartache, from setback, from failure, but that's not life. And I am getting better, but I will fully admit that I was definitely someone who would tend to try and make that phone call on their behalf, would try and remind them multiple times about things they should be doing. I would try and do some research in a certain scenario that they need to get information for. So I did all those things. And like I said, it's based on loving them so much, but really it's actually having the opposite effect. You know, there's a lot. I'm a quote guy. I think you're familiar with that. And I was just listening to this, trying to be a great listener, and I got a lot that is coming to my mind. And one saying that has stuck with me is that good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. So the only way they're going to get better is by making those mistakes and by shielding them from setbacks and failures per se. You're not letting them develop those tools they're going to need for the rest of their life. And there's another one that says, don't let your failures define you, let them refine you. And, you know, to make a biblical reference, it's kind of like the story of giving someone a fish and feeding them for lunch, or teaching them how to fish and allowing them to feed themselves for a lifetime kind of thing. But yeah, so as far as the protecting of your kids, that's a podcast episode on its own, maybe number 116. I think you're at.
Exactly.
But I did want to comment on some of the things Morgan mentioned. You made some great points, Morgan, about how sometimes we're different and we come from different generations, and I think this is something that hopefully some of your listeners and I think we could all benefit from reflecting on this for a minute, because I know as a teacher myself, one of the first things that comes up when you talk about young people these days is how they're addicted to their phones. And Morgan actually made a good point the other day, and I wasn't aware of it. And it was the idea that when you're talking, let's say Morgan and I are talking about something that I feel is important and we're trying to get through an issue or we're sharing information, if they're staring at their phone, like my gut reaction is that's disrespectful. How could you not want to pay attention and be fully present, you know? But, you know, she had mentioned that, you know, in some cases, sometimes when you're stressed and overwhelmed, people have developed the use of the phone as sort of a coping mechanism to maybe distract their mind for a minute. It kind of helps calm them. And I never thought of it that way. So I think it is pretty easy to judge in all scenarios. You know, you try to avoid making assumptions about that. So I think it's true. Like, I am someone who tends to want to give advice and be a problem solver. And I think, you know, what you said about if you can preface a conversation with like, look, Dad, I got a couple things in my mind. I'm gonna share this with you, but really, I just want to be able to talk it out. And I'm not asking for an answer. I don't need a solution. I just need you to hear me out on this. And, you know, that's helpful for me. Maybe I shouldn't have to be told that. But
well, no, what I do want to say too, though, it's not a bad thing, I don't think, to like want to help. Like, I think that's a great.
Because sometimes you do want an answer.
My gosh, totally. Like, there's so many things. Like, hey, Dad, can you help me with this?
Just tell me what to do.
And I appreciate that so much. And I think that's so important. It's just knowing what time is for what.
Bring that kind of clarity to the
I don't think it's a bad thing.
Right. Well, it's like Leah said about how you were impressed that, you know, Morgan feels comfortable sharing these issues that might come up. It's all about communication, right? Like, I believe communication, if you have strong communication, you can almost get through anything. And when she said the listening thing, that's such a big deal, is being a good listener. And I think part of trying to be the best person you can be is knowing areas you need to grow in. And for me, I have my habit tends to be someone who listens to respond more so than listens to understand. And so I find this in different scenarios. I catch myself doing it. And some people have reminded me too, that they can tell that I'm listening, but the wheels are turning and spinning. Okay, what am I going to say back? And you're already formulating what you want to say, and you can't wait for that one little break where you can start giving your 2 cents, when really there's a lot more to be heard. And so that's something I'm trying to work on. And as far as helping our relationship would be, you know, realizing we have different views and perspectives on life, and being a better listener is huge. And actually, another line I actually looked up because I remember hearing something about listening, and I thought it was really poignant, was this. Listening, no, hang on. Here we go.
Yep. He's got it.
Hearing is listening to what is said. Listening is hearing what isn't said.
Reading between the lines.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so like when she's really upset and stuff, it's like maybe there's another reason why she's on her phone. Maybe there's a reason she hasn't followed up on that thing I told her she should have done, like without jumping to conclusions, right? And so yeah, being a good listener is an amazing skill. When you come across a great listener, you know it because you can feel it.
Yeah.
And it builds relationships.
Yeah, for sure.
That's so fun. As you were saying that, I was like, my smirk was getting bigger just because I'm thinking about how like you must resonate with that so much. Just the idea of like people sharing something with you and like the wheels start turning. Like I feel like that's something we've talked about, like at least in our family with you before as well, where you're just like, you can tell you're just like waiting to share something and try to help. And you've worked on that a lot too. Like
still am.
Yeah, I mean, aren't we all just constant?
Yeah.
Constantly trying to improve. But yeah,
look how smooth you are in these podcasts because you're probably okay. How can I bridge this to the next part of the conversation? How do I make connections? So it is a valuable skill.
Yeah.
Within a certain context.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
And actually, doing the podcast that's one of the things I've loved about it. Because you're being present with somebody and really listening to where the conversation is going or needs to go. So it's been a great gift for me to be able to work on listening through this. And I actually really enjoy it. Like I really enjoy it. Leah and I had a really interesting conversation. We were just away in England for a week. We went to a conference. We had a few days hiking just
awesome.
before that, and lots that we learned about each other. Most that we probably already knew. But do you remember the conversation we had about listening? Because I think that's a piece where you and I have a bit of the same wiring, and we can get passionate and talk.
And not leave room for other people to talk.
Do you remember this one?
Yeah,
I
do.
Yeah,
because we were just talking about, different people close in our life who, like, sometimes you need to leave a few seconds before they're ready to start sharing everything. And, like, between Dad and I and other people we work with and hang out with, it's like, we're just going to interject, not in a rude way, but it's because we all have got ideas. And, like, it's like, yeah, you go. Okay, yeah, enter. Like, and we're just sort of talking over each other because we're all just excited and don't feel worried about jumping in. Whereas there's other people where you sort of have to actually stop yourself, leave some space, which we were saying can sometimes feel like ages. and then all of this stuff just comes out that's like in their head, but they're not going to jump in unless you give them the space to do it. And so that's something I've been really trying to get better.
So I think the summary, the learning, the revelation for us in that conversation, but I think what we've been experiencing too over the last year or whatever it might be, as we work on listening, is when we don't talk,
other people
others will.
That's true.
Yeah.
Like I know it sounds so dumb, right?
But sometimes you feel like you need to fill the space. If someone's like shyer or doesn't like more introverted, and it's like, you don't want it to be awkward. But sometimes you just need like a few moments of what might feel awkward to you. Yeah. But then it allows it to be a more.
You have to be like cognizant of other people's needs and like what works for them. Yeah.
Yeah, and just like seeing what could happen when you aren't trying to make things happen.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
The power of the pause.
Truly.
I was waiting for a moment to use that one.
Good choice.
I use it in
Wheels
teaching.
return.
I use it in teaching.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you make a statement and just by allowing it to sit there without anybody saying anything, it gives you a moment to reflect, especially in today's society where it's like, we're not very good at delayed gratification and we got to be entertained and we got to be stimulated by stuff coming at us so quickly, right? So I think some time to reflect on what someone just said. And even I find when I teach the careers classes and we talk about job interviews and that it's, it's okay to not feel like you need to start your answer right away. When someone asks you a question, take a minute and think about it for a second. It actually shows some confidence as well. You know what I mean? When you're nervous, you feel like you have to say something. And it's like you said, you feel like you have to occupy that quiet time. But sometimes by letting that quiet space exist, someone else might be able to step up. And so, I find myself having to be reminded that the power of the pause is huge.
And now we all want to pause. But it's interesting, eh? There's cool. So, but I'll jump in. I'll be the one to break the pause and be the worst listener.
So self-like.
It's okay. But it's interesting. I don't know how you guys feel this. I feel like this is sort of reflecting what we were talking about earlier, that to let your kids, you guys, our daughters, become who they need to become, make decisions for yourself, not solve all of your problems for yourself, not fix the hula loop. We got to pause and let go and leave some space and trust and wait, and yeah. Leah, I hadn't heard you on this one. What's your experience of maybe where I've jumped in and given you answers, that just not leaving space for you to be, or maybe another way to think about it is when there isn't space for that, for you just to talk as opposed to here's some things that you should do. What's it feel like? Like what's that like compared to when you feel like maybe there's been space allowed for you to figure it out, experience it?
I don't know if I have specific examples because like I was saying, like you and I are so similar in that way where we both are just like jumping in, like, I have no problem just like jumping in and saying something over top of you and vice versa, like in a in a good way. It's not like injuring, like, no, listen to me. So I don't know. Like, I feel like typically when I do come to you, it's rarely to just vent. I feel like I usually come to you when I do want some answers or like want some feedback. And it's like, it is still like very clear at the beginning. I'm like, what do you think about this? Like, I'm going to share something with you. What do you think about this? Like, just give me your thoughts, not necessarily exactly what I should do, but just like interpret this scenario and just what would you do kind of thing. And then I can take that and do it for myself. So I've found that to be the most helpful of not like, Dad, tell me what to do. Like every so often it's like a small thing, like, what do you think I should do here? But I love asking, what would you do? Like if this was you in this situation or going through this, and then I can take that and really like let it sink in and filter through like who I am and what makes sense. So I don't have a specific, I don't know if I've ever felt that like, oh, you didn't listen to me. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe there are and they're just not there. Sure, but I feel like that's been a really great way for us to communicate and me to come to you is just like, what would you do? And then take that and run. So
that's a big sign of respect because you want to know what he would do. You obviously value the decisions he makes.
I do. I absolutely do. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's ride that wave for a little bit as far as what do we appreciate about each other? Because I think that's part of what makes the relationship good. There's a lot that we appreciate each other. And as we were talking earlier, it doesn't mean that we appreciate everything about each other. And we'll get to that too, because there's things that we rub each other. We're human. But, and I think what's interesting in this circle for the four of us to have this conversation is we often think about parents being proud of their kids and appreciating their kids. But I think we're learning as you guys become adults that it works the other way around too. Yeah. So we can talk in multiple dimensions and directions. Oh yeah. What we're proud of, what we appreciate about each other.
That's true. And I think one of the coolest things is actually like, and I feel like Morgan, we're only just in this phase, and maybe you're starting to see it too. But like when you get to the point where you start to see like your parents evolve as well, because like I mean, as like human beings, we're constantly evolving. Yeah. It's not like you get to adulthood and you're just like done. Yeah. But as kids, like that's sort of how you view, especially your parents, like the all-knowing, like you look up to them for everything. And then now we're at this point where it's like, I still see you and mom like changing and growing, and it's so cool. And I think that's something I'm probably most proud of. And when I see you and how you live your life is how open you are to change and grow and always trying to better yourself. You're never done growing. And that inspires me. Like, and I feel like that's just at the core of who you are, and such a great thing to surround your life around really is, I mean, you were mentioning it earlier, Sean, just that constant growth, and what makes you a good person, or the pursuit of being a good person, is being open to growing and changing and not staying stuck in your ways, because there's always room to get better at something. So.
No, I totally agree with that, because I was just thinking the other day, I feel like now that, moved out of the house and, you're not surrounded by your parents 24/7, you can kind of reflect and think like, not that this sounds weird. I didn't think you were not a human, but I pictured you as like my parent for so long as a kid. Like, that's my dad. But you're your own person. Like, you're Sean. Like, you have your own goals and your own things that motivate you and that you're striving for, that when I was a kid, maybe I would have been a bit more tunnel vision and thinking, okay, well, I want this, and this is my goal, and my dad's so supportive and going to support me, which I've always appreciated about you. You never, made me feel bad about what I want to pursue or ever question really my decisions. You were always there for me, which I am so thankful for. But now as an adult, you're kind of like, wow, like I'm going to be a parent one day and I don't have all the answers. And I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, but you didn't either. But I kind of felt like that as a kid. You're like, well, they do, like you said, all knowing. And just kind of being a bit removed now, living separate. And if I do have something to go to you for, it's a text, and I'm realizing how often I'm, going to you. It's just a testament to how present and wonderful you were all growing up. And now I can kind of be a bit like that for you now, hopefully, and support your dreams and your goals and things that you're achieving. Like one of the main things I'm proud of is, teacher. We've talked about that. And we're out like in public, anywhere, grocery store, I don't know. And there's always people coming up and saying, oh, Mr. Hilliker, I love you, like miss you. Like people from years ago.
That's
so
awesome.
Cool.
And some people, I'm sure you have so many students, and maybe you don't remember each and every student vividly and every single bit about them. But the fact you've touched so many people's lives is just a testament to not only who you are as a teacher, but just a person. And I felt motivated through your optimism and strength. Like, I know we talked about, parents, it's hard to want to fix everything, but that is also something that I've appreciated. And so now, like, seeing how much you've done for others and that optimism, even if I can be a little, I don't want help in this moment, I just want to vent. It is helpful in retrospect, thinking back on it and being like, okay, maybe I can be more positive. Maybe I should implement more positive thinking. Maybe I should do these things that you preach and try to instill in us. And so I just appreciate all that, just the optimism, the positivity, and how it's impacted others, not just me as your daughter.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty
to be proud
amazing.
of your dad when you're out in public and students come up and want to say hello. And I say this to my wife, Katrina, all the time, who also is a teacher, math teacher. Sean, I hope you know and hear that not every student does that with every teacher. Because the other side is often, if you see a teacher you didn't like or wasn't a good teacher, exactly, you go down the other aisle, you avoid them. So I just want to kind of like say that, like, that's awesome.
Well, I was nervous. I went to high school where he taught, and you'd be nervous in the halls if the students are like, oh, your dad's Mr. Hilliker. But it was always, oh, your dad's Mr. Hilliker. And I felt so proud. I never felt embarrassed or, I go to school with my dad. I felt like, that's my dad. Like,
that's
he's
cool.
awesome.
That's cool. Can we have a little sidebar on going to school where your dad is a teacher? Because that's just too cool not to touch you a little bit. So just what were the highlights of that? What were the good things? And what were maybe the challenges with that?
The good things, I had a ride all the time. No, awesome. My dad ran the assemblies. He's a very talkative and, exciting figure. So it was always fun to see him. That's where he shines, like with others, and like just getting to watch that from the stands was always cool. And I remember one time, like, I left my lunch in his room, and at the middle of the assembly, he's like, and I have a lunch I'm giving out to one lucky student, Morgan Hilliker. Like, just a joke, because he just would like announce it in front of everyone and be like, it'd be funny. I enjoyed it. Honestly, I don't have many negatives. Like, I mean, when you're with friends and there's boys and relationships and stuff, like, it's like a little awkward seeing your dad in the halls with like your boyfriend. Like, I don't know, but I never really felt anything negative from that experience. I'm sure other people maybe have had experiences, but since he was so well received by the students, it was a lot easier than having to people be like, oh, your dad. Yeah.
He wasn't the hated teacher.
No,
he was the beloved.
It was pretty
That's cool.
pretty well liked overall. So I didn't really have many issues. I don't know if it was weird for you to have me there, but
have Morgan there.
He's like, well, I had a different experience.
No. For me, it was very positive. I mean, when it first was going to happen, I was wondering, okay, what should I do here to make sure she has her own space? I don't want to make this about me. I want her to have her own identity. And I wasn't sure how it was going to go. I was pretty confident that it was going to go well because I know we had a great relationship, and I have a good rapport with the student body. I think it would be a lot trickier if your parent was like the vice principal, who has a very tough job and has got to enforce the rules and isn't always, the most popular.
Yeah.
So we were in a good situation there. And she was never in any of my classes as far as me marking her work.
We made sure of that. I think that was intentional, right?
Not really. I never requested that. It's just your courses never seemed to jive with what I was teaching.
Right.
I had a lot of elective optional courses, but to me it was amazing because I felt that she still had her own space. There would be plenty of times where I wouldn't see her much at all during the day, but I was able to be privy to some pretty special moments, like different events she was involved in at school. I'd obviously have a front row seat to all these things she was involved with. And I got to see subtle moments that I think most parents don't get a chance to see of your kid do some really cool things. And I also got some really emotional, proud feedback from my peers who have had her in class. Tell me stories of things she would do and how she would treat other people. And, obviously she was a very accomplished student, but more so than that, it was just the comments that really hit home, that really make you feel most proud, is not so much what they accomplish on their own. It's, how they make a difference in other people, how they choose to, seek out how they can brighten someone else's day. And a lot of kids at that age don't think like that. It tends to be more about yourself, but Morgan's always been someone with an extra helping of empathy. And so I saw a lot of examples of that, and that made me really proud. So I was really grateful for the opportunity to have some closeness during those pretty influential and formational years of high school.
Hey everyone, man, I told you it was a two-parter, so I'm not going to say too much here because I hope you can join us for the second part of this conversation. I will just say this: we get to the harder stuff coming up in this next one. This has been good. It's been great. Love the openness. Love talking about how we're proud of each other and all that kind of stuff. But we get into some pretty real, what do you do when the rubber hits the road, when maybe things don't go so well and you need to work through some stuff. Part 2 coming up. Hope you can join us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram. Good News with Jamie Holtom. God bless you, friends.